I was 11 years old when the original Gothic was released, and naturally, I got to experience it thanks to the grim and gritty world I'd be exploring as part of my adventure. Those years went by, and the game remained among a few other titles I looked back on quite wistfully, as other ones kept coming up to divert my attention. Now imagine my surprise when I found out I could now dive into an adventure, complete with a makeover from Alchemia that aimed to let it take the spotlight amongst a bevy of other great RPGs in the current generation of gaming platforms. It's been a mixed bag, with the joy of unbridled, unguided discovery being marred by technical issues that have no business being in a game that's clearly aimed at a modern, very discerning audience. I always pick the good news first, and that's what we're going to do with this one. From the very beginning of your time with the Nameless Hero, you're more or less left to your own devices as you try to survive King Rogar's prison or mining colony, the magical barrier that keeps you there acting as a grim reminder of the circumstances that have unfolded since the mage's botched attempt to create their own version of an electrified fence. And the game wastes no time in setting the stakes, tasking you with delivering a letter to a mage within the old camp, one of three major factions within the colony. You get a small introduction to what life is like within the confines from a helpful member of the camp before you get to begin exploring a world that's as brutal as they come. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that this one's as hard as any of the games I've played over the years, and that's counting a bunch of Souls-likes that have had me at my wit's end with some enemies and bosses that they have thrown my way. Most hostiles in this one can take you down in 1 or 2 hits, while you don't even get a starting weapon to take them on with. An NPC that you meet along the way did tell me I was going to need weapons and armor before I was ready to explore the world, but they were less than helpful when I asked them where I could go ahead and find them. And that's a kind of pattern in this one, and the lack of usual markers and helpful indicators that point you in the right direction was a very refreshing change of pace. This is old school game design, and it's a very enjoyable part of the experience on offer. Now, of course, I must concede that it could be a detail that puts you off of the experience depending on your own individual preferences, but I personally love games that allow me to put in hard work and then reap those rewards. Quests are designed in a way that gives you multiple possible approaches, if you can sniff them all out, and each option comes with trade-offs that you're going to have to live with. For instance, an NPC whose approval I desperately needed to get past the guards at a gate told me to deal with a member of the new camp who had been running a bit of a scam. I dealt with the man in question by leading him out of the old camp under the pretense of wanting to sign up with his faction, only to turn on him when a group of scavengers attacked us. Problem solved. I then returned to the camp, stopping to meet a weapons vendor along the way. He wasn't too happy with what I had done as I put an end to his supply chain. He assured me that he wasn't going to vote in my favor if he was asked if I was going to be a good fit for the old camp. And details like that make this world feel alive, and it's what made Gothic so memorable for me. However, I'm also going to remember it for a lot of frustrations and heartbreaks. I'm not going to forget how I lost nearly 3 hours of progress thanks to the lack of an autosave system coupled with frequent crashes, a combination that soon had me manually saving my game at literally every turn. That's an omission that I believe is a missed opportunity, and a way to truly let the game combine its welcome old school vision with a bit of modern convenience. However, the problems don't stop there. I appreciate the effort to recreate the game's visuals, and there's certainly a lot to like about the new lighting system and the upgraded textures. However, the lack of a performance mode is something that I find very hard to ignore, especially in the face of a combat system that relies quite heavily on reading enemy animations and responding to them within windows that are far too narrow even on the easiest difficulty option that there is. Your hero's combat prowess is almost negligible in the game's early hours. Couple that with enemies whose animations aren't telegraphed as well as they should be, and you've got a recipe for needless frustrations that actively hinder your progress. That's especially egregious when you consider that it takes a while for you to get your hands on some decent armor, although I will concede that getting your hands on a weapon is comparatively easier once you know where to look. And with that said, the game's melee combat is too clunky for my tastes, and it often comes down to chugging healing items while dealing with attacks from enemies that can end you with just one badly timed parry. Ranged weapons, they served me a lot better, and I found myself relying on my bow and a bit of magic once you unlock it over my sword for the most part, or getting NPCs to do the fighting for me. The XP thresholds that you need to unlock levels are quite high when you think about how difficult it is to whittle away at enemy health bars, and getting your character's stats to a place of comfort is going to be a steep climb up a hill that has danger at every turn. There's a lot of room for improvement on the combat front in this one. That's a pity, considering the human enemies that defeat you in combat don't kill you outright, but loot all of the valuable stuff you've spent hours gathering to fill their own pockets. In a title where combat was more balanced, that's an opportunity to go back for a rematch and regain your lost valuables. In Gothic Remake, it's just better to take that loss and then move on, and that is a real shame. Crashes and wonky combat animations aside, there were other issues, such as NPCs randomly appearing out of thin air, while others would get stuck in their own animations without dialogue windows popping up when you go to interact with them. Both problems were frequent enough to be noticeable and definitely took away from the impressive visuals. And the audio was similarly buggy, often cutting off into total silence at several points, or including the chatter from other characters in crowded spaces during a one-on-one dialogue that forced me to turn on subtitles just so that I could keep up with what was actually being said. For a remake that was meant to usher this one into the modern age, there's a lot of problems from the era of gaming that I thought we left behind for good. So now it's time to answer the question that I'm sure you're all asking. Would I recommend this one to you? And personally, I'm going to persist with the adventure and hope for updates that fix the issues that I've highlighted here, but I wouldn't recommend paying full price for this one in its current state. The story is absolutely riveting thanks to how well written each character in the world at large is. But on the technical front, this one comes with too many annoyances that constantly interrupt that experience in ways that can have you giving up on it altogether. There's a lot to love about Gothic 1 Remake, but the game constantly works against itself in ways that make it hard to then recommend. If you're a seasoned veteran of The Colony, you're probably going to find its issues easier to ignore than a newcomer. But if this is your first time with this one, know that this remake is a superb visual overhaul that fails to hide a plethora of issues that make it hard to engage with. But for those of you who persist, you're in for a look at what games used to be like back in the day, which could have you quite immersed in a story that continues to pull its weight even today. So I'd wait for a sale on this one, as much as it pains me to say it. But like The Colony, modern gaming is an unforgiving place, and Gothic 1 Remake stumbles far too often for it to stand tall amongst its competition. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.